What if the most important lesson wasn't found in a textbook, but in a quiet walk beneath the trees? What if education isn't a race to collect facts, but a sacred act of attention? What if knowing yourself doesn't start with answers, but with wonder? By the end of this video, you'll see how Charlotte Mason, an overlooked 19th century thinker, offered a radical, holistic view of education. Through nature, habit, and story, she reframed learning not as preparation for life, but as life itself. And in doing so, she quietly challenged everything we still assume about how we come to know ourselves. In Victorian England, where strict discipline and rote memorization defined schoolrooms, Charlotte Mason saw something sacred in the child, not a brain to be filled, a soul to be awakened. She famously declared, "Children are born persons, not potential persons, persons now." And so, education had to honor that fullness. Instead of confining children to desks and drills, she sent them out to sketch trembling leaves, track migrating birds, memorize the psalms of wind. To her, nature was not a break from learning. It was the beginning of knowledge itself. "Never be within doors when you can rightly be without," Mason wrote. But her method wasn't aimless. She believed children needed training, not of the mind alone, but of attention, imagination, and habit. Here's where it gets radical. Mason's boldest claim, that education is the science of relations. But what does that really mean? It means this. Knowledge isn't just content we pour into a child's mind. It's a living connection. A web of relationships between the learner and everything around them. Nature, people, books, history, art, language, even God. To know anything deeply, she insisted, we must not just observe it, we must relate to it, emotionally, imaginatively, and repeatedly. Think about it. You remember stories, not statistics, people, not procedures, moments, not modules. And for those relationships to form, she argued, we must feed the mind like the body. Living ideas, not lifeless facts. Living books, not dry textbooks. But what is a living book really? It's not just any well-written book, not a textbook polished by editors or a curriculum guide compiled by experts. For Charlotte Mason, a living book is something far more intimate. It breathes, it pulses. It carries intellectual and moral vitality, the kind that stirs your mind and your heart. A living book has voice. It's not the neutral tone of authority, but the unmistakable cadence of a soul who has lived the ideas they write about. It's not about information, it's about invitation. Mason believed these books invited children into conversation, not just comprehension. They didn't just tell them what to think. They offered them something worth thinking about. Relationship forms between the reader and the ideas. And for Mason, this was the only way to educate the whole person, not just the mind, but the spirit, the character, the will. But not everyone agrees with her. Let's open the debate. First, on the role of the teacher. Mason envisioned the teacher not as a lecturer or authority figure, but as a guide on the side, a facilitator of ideas. Critics wonder, is this gentle guidance too gentle? Can struggling learners really thrive without more structure? Is too much freedom still freedom for everyone? Second, faith as foundation. At the heart of Mason's philosophy is a deeply Christian worldview. She saw education as a spiritual act, a sacred calling to shape souls. But today, in our pluralistic and often secular classrooms, the question echoes. Can we translate her philosophy to secular settings without stripping it of its essence? Is her model universally adaptable or inextricably theological? Third, narration over testing. Instead of grades and exams, Mason used narration, asking students to retell in their own words what they'd read and understood. Not just a memory check, but a synthesis, a personal reflection. Supporters say this builds ownership, depth, and retention, skeptics ask. But without rubrics and testing, how do we measure growth? How do we know they're truly learning? Fourth, habit as 10 natures. One of Mason's most radical and hauntingly beautiful ideas. Habit is 10 natures. She meant that who we are is not set in stone. Character is formed, brick by brick, choice by choice, through habitual action. Rising early, speaking kindly, pausing to notice the small sacred moments. She saw these not as restrictions, but as keys to a good life. But some ask, is this true formation or elegant conditioning? Are we nurturing integrity or merely obedience? Still, Mason held fast to this idea of freedom with form. True freedom, she wrote, is not the ability to do anything. It's the ability to choose the good, willingly, again and again. In that sense, she wasn't trying to control children. She was trying to awaken them to beauty, to goodness, to their own inner strength. And in that awakening, she believed lies real education. Would she still believe the same today? And do we? In a world obsessed with productivity hacks and test scores, Mason offers us something gently subversive. Reverence for time, for beauty, for the slow unfolding of a person. Nature study, in her view, wasn't about naming plants. It was a training in attention, a muscle that now atrophies under every scroll. The question is not how much does the youth know when he has finished his education, but how much does he care, she asked. Could that be the better question? Could Mason's philosophy revive something we've lost? Could it remind us that knowing ourselves may begin in noticing the world? Maybe real education isn't about information gained, but about selves discovered. And maybe that discovery starts not in mastering knowledge, but in being mastered by wonder. In the hush between sunrise and habit, in the quiet strength of a life shaped by story and rhythm, we might begin to see what Mason saw, that the child is already a person, and that the journey of education is the slow unveiling of that soul. What part of your day could become sacred? What habit might form your soul? Comment below with one small rhythm you want to reclaim, and subscribe for more slow journeys into ancient truths.